Welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast, episode 89. This is actually a bonus episode because it's a recording from another podcast that I was on recently that we thought just provides massive value if you're looking to create permanent change in your life. So we brought it over here. So if you like this episode, you should check out Brian and Lindsay's podcast, Conquer the Day. It's great for ambitious professionals who want to level up with their health and fitness. But back to our show. We're not going to interrupt this show midway with sponsored ads or asking you for ratings or reviews then. So while you're just getting settled, we ask for a small favor that you take 2 seconds to support our show by giving it a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Ratings and reviews allow us to bring more knowledgeable and influential people onto the show for you to learn everything possible about science and sustainability with respect to your goals. Now, if you like this episode in particular, screenshot it and tag us on Instagram. Our handles are in the show notes to show your support. One share could be the catalyst for someone in your life to transform their body, health, and fitness for good. And of course, it helps our show grow too, and we appreciate that. Thanks again for listening. We don't take your attention for granted, so let's get right into it. Episode number 89, How to Create Permanent Change, my interview with Conquer the Day podcast. Welcome to today's episode of Conquer the Day. Today we have one of our dear friends, Marissa Roy, with us. Now, this is going to be a very interesting, fun episode for you to dive into, and one that I think you're going to learn a lot from, not just in fitness and nutrition, what it takes to build a permanently healthy lifestyle or upgrade your lifestyle, but really how to shift your mindset based off of Marissa's example. Marissa is one of the most diligent, intelligent, driven women I know, and her background, her history really shows that. She started coaching at 18 years old after putting up her own website, popping it up there, and starting a YouTube channel to document her whole journey. All of this kind of started at the same time. And I, fun fact, actually watched most of her videos during my cardio sessions back in the day. And when we realized that we were in the same mastermind many years later, we're like, oh, we must just be destined to be friends because we are intertwined. But Marissa has a bachelor's in neuroscience. She's working on her master's in applied exercise science and sports nutrition. She's a certified strength and conditioning coach, personal trainer, and pre and postnatal coach. She's also the founder of Permanent Change Coaching. At PCC, they're focused on teaching sustainable change through behavior change and training in nutrition education. So a lot there, right? That's like just a little bit of insight into what I mean when I say she's extremely driven. So we're going to dive into all of that, what built her. And we're so looking forward to diving in on this episode and getting to kind of pick her brain on what pushes her to grow. So Marissa, thanks for being here. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's so funny. I have a podcast. I introduce people all the time like this, and like they're always like, wow, that was so overwhelming. Now I feel like I have big shoes to fill, and now I get it. I'm like, oh God, you just hyped me up so much. But thank you. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. I actually was I went back. It's so funny. We won't digress too far. But I think about what people must think when they find my old YouTube, like the oldest videos. I went back to I listened to your first video today just to get some insight. And I'm just like, wow, we've come so far. Like, it was great. We had fun, but
oh yeah,
just so funny.
Those old YouTube videos. I look back at those and I'm like, I have changed so much.
Well, it's interesting. I saw one of our old YouTube videos pop up because it's been 5 years since we moved from New Hampshire to Los Angeles. And it's like, wow, that's really cool that I have that, right? For myself, it's like, it's a very cool representation of growth, and to have like a moment in time to be able to go back to and be like, oh, wow. Yeah, it's a little embarrassing, or I definitely would have changed this, the way I was saying this or the way I was doing this, but it's also a cool benchmark to always be able to turn back to.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool to reflect on like how far you've come with just like your own personal development. And for me, speaking to a camera, like, oh God.
Yeah. It's so interesting, but it also gave me a little bit of inspiration going into this episode, because I was like, okay, there's so many different angles that we could go at here. But what I love the most is that you really have an implementer's mindset. Like, you hear something, implement it so fast, like, and then that accelerates your growth, whether it's for you, for your business. Like, I see it in a lot of different areas just as an observer. So I'm curious to start just either hearing who shaped that mindset, meaning that perspective of the world and of the work, or what experiences shaped that for you so that you can approach problem solving that way.
Yeah. So it's funny because we like hopped on, you're like, sorry, I sent the questions late, but nothing will stump you. And I'm like trying to think like really where that came from. And like, I know like roughly, obviously where my like point of view about the world came from, but like that one thing in particular, why do I implement so fast? I'm not 100% sure. I'm a little stumped, but I will say, and you guys know this obviously very well, that like I can get super emotional about my father, who is freaking amazing. And like, honestly, I think now that I think about it, probably both of my parents have shaped that mindset and perspective on the world of like, why not just do the thing? Why don't you just put yourself out there? Why don't you just start the thing? Why don't you put the website up or whatever? And I think probably the other side of that, my dad has always just shaped me to be very open-minded and very growth oriented in everything that I do, where I don't try to do things. He would always pick at my language when I was a kid. And if I said, I'm going to try to do this thing, I'm going to try to get better at volleyball. I grew up playing volleyball and that was like my main thing, but I'm going to try to learn guitar. I'm going to try to do this. And every time I would say that, he would say, well, don't try to do anything. Like, trying implies failure. Just do it. Just learn it. Just become that person. Right. And so that really shaped the way that I like started to look at language and how we talk to ourselves and how that then influences our actions, which I'm sure we'll dive very deep into. But then I don't give a lot of credit to my mom, but when I think about it, it's funny because she's just an impatient person, very impatient. Like, she's Korean, she likes things done now. And I think that's where it comes from. I'm just impatient. So like, if I have an idea, I'm like, what is the point of waiting to do this thing? Like, I need it done. And so I think I'm just like frustrated in any like limbo time where like I just want the thing done. And I'm very like opposite of a perfectionist in that way, where like I will take like 80% and finished compared to like 100% perfect and never done, because you can always fix something once you have it running or working and see like where the holes are and improve it, versus like waiting until something is so perfect that you're finally ready to launch it or, you know, put it out there. So I think I think I got to give my mom some credit. Like, it comes off obviously in positive ways and negative ways when someone is very impatient, but I think I can give her a lot of credit for that.
When you think of that mindset and being able to see like that you do take action, you push yourself, you're fearless, or at least you are courageous, right? Which is a better way of looking at it, because we always experience fear. And then you couple that with like the idea that you are aggressively impatient. How was that helpful when you started approaching fitness? Right? Was that helpful? Was that hurtful? Like, what was the balance between those two?
Yeah, I think definitely helpful, and I wouldn't say hurtful, but I would say like maybe if I had hindsight at that time in my life, I would have taken things in different orders of steps. So like I've pretty much always been this way with the few interests that I've had in life, which are volleyball and fitness and business. And like my life has stayed very much on those trajectories, but like from youth to like end of high school, like as soon as I fell in love with the sport, I was like, okay, this is going to be my entire life now, and everything revolves around it. And then as soon as I finished that, I got into fitness. I was like, all right, head first. I'm going to work at the gym. I'm going to live at the gym. I'm going to have my relationships at the gym, like, and then I'm going to get into bodybuilding and do all this stuff. Did that for a few years, and now like my life has very much revolved more around business and growing the business. And so I think, just to your question, like, what has it helped? I think it's just helped me to like continue taking action, always seeing like what the next step is, and like not really delaying any of that, and not waiting until the right opportunity or the right time to do something, and just kind of like doing it. But I will say, when you said, what does it hurt? I will think of a specific instance of my first bodybuilding show that I did when I was 19, 18, 19. I was young, and like, in all honesty, probably had no real business being on a bodybuilding stage, because I had been lifting seriously for like a year and a half at that point. And you know how hard it is to build muscle. And as a girl who literally is 5'6", I stepped on stage at 110 pounds.
Wow.
And I was a stick. And I had no business like being on a bodybuilding stage, where like the point is you have shape, you have muscle, right? But I was like, I just want to do the damn thing, right? Like, I was just so into lifting and bodybuilding at the time. And I was like, this is just the next step. I just have to do this and just see what's up, right? So that's what like really kicked off the whole like really being into fitness and coaching journey for me. Was it too early? Probably. Did I still learn some awesome things and get a great experience out of it? Absolutely. So like, in hindsight, maybe I should have waited, a couple more years before I competed. But like, at the end of the day, like, would I really change anything? Like, I don't think it hurt necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, because I was anticipating that maybe you went all into dieting. I actually don't know too much about your younger years. Like, I know that you were really into volleyball, and I think you've briefly talked about you didn't have the best relationship with food. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I can like give you a long story short if you like.
Sure.
So yeah, basically volleyball was my life from age like 11 to like 17. And somewhere in the middle of that, I believe it probably was sparked when I actually played a year up on the travel team. And because I was around older girls, and like, to me, when I was a sophomore in high school, hanging out with the juniors was this big deal to me, right? And I was like, that's such a big age gap for whatever reason. Now I'm friends with like people 10 years older than me, and it doesn't make a difference. But then it was a big deal, and I just felt the need to really try to fit in with that group. And I felt this like, probably what I would call now imposter syndrome. And they were all very, image conscious and body conscious. And volleyball is a sport where you wear tight shorts and like cute little outfits, right? And so I started to kind of get that like influence of social media was starting to take off, and I had that all around me all the time. So I started to get into the whole, okay, how do I get skinnier? How do I like look leaner, have abs, be thinner? Because that's what all these other volleyball girls look like. And so that's really like 14, 15 years old when I started like counting calories, going on my fitness pal, 1,200 calories. And really, like, I had a pretty messed up relationship with food, to be honest. Like, I would try to hit 1,200 calories. I'd do it for like a day or two tops. And then I would just binge on everything in the pantry, because I was training for sports, like 8 hours a week, 10 hours a week. And then on top of that, I would do extra conditioning and extra running just because I needed to burn more calories. And so it was a really, really toxic cycle. And it took a couple years for me to really like recognize and get out of that. And I can credit social media for helping me to not only get in that cycle, but also out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's what I was going to say is
backstory.
if you think about like where that influence came from, like obviously there's these different influences that work. It's like you have the positive of social media, and then you have the negative of like being able to see like excessive dieting or anything of the like. How do you think that the way that you approach fitness changes over the years? Like how has it changed? Like when did it start to pivot more towards just being healthy, being strong, and just living an overall well-based lifestyle?
Yeah, I think that this holds a good theme in like my journey, as well as a lot of people's journeys, and just like how the pendulum really swings, because I really went from and with a lot of things, it's about maybe you start at one extreme and then you realize it's not for you, so you swing to the other end. And then at the end of the day, we almost always kind of end up in the middle, right? And so that was really what happened for me was, on one side, restrict a ton. I want to get as small as possible, and just dieting is my life, and I need to be smaller and smaller and smaller. And I didn't necessarily compete in that mindset, but it obviously didn't help the first time I did a show.
Right.
And then the opposite is like, I just want to live my life and eat whatever I want, and I don't really care about my health and fitness. I don't ever think I necessarily got to that point, but I think it went from like clean eating to like, let's eat all the ice cream we can within our macros, to now I'm in this place where like I feel very balanced in my approach. I am dieting at the moment because I have a wedding in 8 weeks for myself. um, but I have like the most well-rounded mindset around it that I feel like I've ever had. And so I think a lot of times, whether it's with like dieting and being on the wagon and then falling off the wagon and being screw fitness, it sucks. And we always kind of end up in the middle over time as we go through this journey. And it's always in kind of different contexts where we swing through that pendulum. But I feel like that is, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I'm curious thinking about like someone else who's in that position. How do you find your way to the middle, right? Because maybe someone who's hearing this is like, okay, well, yeah, I have tried dieting, or you know what, maybe I've kind of let myself off, and I don't really have a conscious awareness around some of those habits, and I'm not really where I want to be. What advice would you give someone who's trying to find the middle? Like where does the middle start, or how do we
does it start or end?
Yeah, well, how do we work our way there? What are some of the principles or the thoughts that people usually need to start seeing in order to work their way to the middle?
That's a good question. Honestly, I feel like part of it, you have to experience an extreme to understand what your middle ground is, almost in a way. I don't necessarily think that that's everyone, but I think we kind of all have our own spectrum of what our pendulum swing is. And some people, go from like all or nothing mindset, like 0 to 100, and that's just the spectrum that they operate within. And eventually they hopefully, with the right guidance, get to the middle of that. But, some people, maybe they just don't necessarily grow up with the worst relationship with food and they never completely fall off track. So maybe their whole spectrum of things is a little bit narrower. But I think that there's still like swing for each person where like they hit a point where they are really dissatisfied with their body and they want to change it, or they just feel like they're putting way too much time, energy, and headspace into their fitness and they kind of need to get to that. But I feel like you have to experience one under the other to really find your way towards the middle, because how do you know what the middle is if you've never been on either end?
That's a good point.
I love the idea of the middle being balanced, healthy, being able to be flexible, if you will, because I think that it's a good illustration for the habits that people have when they're trying to lose weight or they're trying to get in shape. And there's this restriction element, and then the other element of it is not consciously thinking of our food, not working out, allowing ourselves to drink too much, allowing ourselves to not really take care of ourselves. So it's a really good illustration of, I'm trying to get to the middle rather than balanced. Because I think balance implies that it's like another form of perfectionism.
Like it's teetering.
Yeah.
Like trying to find the teeter point and then hang out there.
Yeah. It's like, and then you feel like, oh, well, I'm out of balance, so therefore I'm going to go back the other way. It's like, no, if I'm in the middle, I can kind of go a little this way to the left. I can go a little this to the way to the right.
It's like driving.
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, also,
correct.
With that too, like balance is such a misconstrued concept because we talk about like balance and sustainability. You have to have sustainability in your approach towards fitness. I think that's something like both you guys and I preach and what we coach and how we coach. But at the end of the day, like, even if you are dieting in a sustainable way, dieting itself is not sustainable. So you might have periods of unsustainability within a sustainable framework. And you have to understand like the ebbs and flows of balance, in air quotes, if you're not watching this on video, but like you have to understand that that's going to ebb and flow and there's going to be more give and take in certain phases or seasons of your life. But as a whole, is the overall methodology of what you're doing generally more sustainable? And like, can you apply those same principles in different contexts? I think that's where the sustainability is found, not necessarily this one approach that you have to do this one thing for the rest of your life. I think that can be very misconstrued.
Yeah. Well, it's a different frame, because when we think of, I'll zoom out of the frame because you just described several different ones. I don't know if you've read Tale of Two Cities, but there's a bunch of different frames that they tell the story within, different perspectives, different frames, and they zoom out and zoom in on one character. That's what I feel like we're doing within this balance conversation.
Yeah.
Because what you just described is the entire approach to the process of changing your, I'll say, health, body weight, something along those lines. It's like you have to see it as periods of unsustainability within a sustainable framework, right? Two different layers within that dialogue. So and that's great because that's already like it could be a paradigm shift for somebody. Because it's like I tell one of my clients who's been dieting for a year, like, we're about to do a 2-week diet break because you have 50 more pounds. So we're coming out of the diet because your life is not a diet. And in the bodybuilding world, I think that people will preach, this is a lifestyle, this is a lifestyle, this is a lifestyle, to prep 7 meals a day, to eat and track your food. And I know I used to say that, like, oh, it's just, this is my lifestyle. This is the way I choose to live. For you, when you're thinking of how you found your way to this new frame where it's like, yeah, I can diet for my wedding, but it doesn't mean like I'm dieting and I'm going to die. And this is like brutal. And this is my lifestyle now. It's like you see it very, very differently, I would imagine. How did you find your way to the middle? And what changed within your mindset, whether it's around food or around your body or around training or all of the above to get here?
So I don't know if I have an answer for myself personally, but I can tell you how my philosophy as a whole has really shifted.
Sure.
And I think that I've just applied it to myself over time as well. And so, I think at the end of the day, like, a lot of things that we learn in, say, a coaching program or in a diet or in a fat loss phase in particular are tools and they're training wheels. And I like to think of it as like, if you're an athlete, this is practice versus game time. And so a lot of times people really veer off track and say, well, everybody says macro tracking is so sustainable, but like, I can't do it like when I'm traveling or I'm out of the house or I'm not in my routine, right? And that used to be me. I just made a post on this, I think yesterday, because I traveled for this weekend. I used to hate traveling because like I could only stay on track when I was home, right? And so basically what I've had to shift is like really viewing like at home with my food scale and my app, like that's practice. That is where you're like on the court, you're getting reps in and you're teaching yourselves these skills that you want to become more automatic so that when it comes time to go into the game and like really exercise these skills, you don't have to think about it so hard, right? And you don't have to feel like a stranger in what you're doing. And so I really like to think of it as like practices, scrimmages, game time. Game time is like when you've kind of graduated from the training wheels, right? Like you don't need to log all your food anymore. You don't need to like search MyFitnessPal to know like what you're putting on your plate or like how to fuel your body. Game time is really exercising that for the rest of your life and having those tools be like the foundation to the sustainable, balanced, quote, 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 lifestyle that we're all talking about and working towards. But I think a lot of people confuse practice as the game, right? They think that like, oh, the lifestyle is now that I need to weigh my food every day for the rest of my life. Like, no way, right? And so people like then kind of tune out of the process because they think that that's what needs to stick for the rest of their life, not the actual meaning behind the tools that they're using that will eventually translate into game time. You know what I mean?
So good. I actually had somebody say yesterday, that same person who's been dieting for a year, I talked to her about the diet break and how she'd have 20 or 40 extra grams of protein or something specific. She's like, wow, what's crazy is like, a year ago, I would have thought you were crazy and had no idea what you're talking about. I can picture how much food that is.
Yeah.
Like, yes. And that's exactly what you're describing. You're basically building a log in your mind to be able to just pull it out and be like, oh yeah, this is a healthy plate of food. And I know that because it's probably 500, 800 calories right here. Like, love that.
And so one of the things that you really focus on in your coaching is a blend of education and emphasizing education. What do you feel like the most important things are that clients need to know when they want to really change permanently when it comes to their body, their health, how they show up for themselves, the habits they have?
I'm prepared for this question, guys. I had to do a lot of thinking about this question because our company name is Permanent Change Coaching. And our motto is like, we are here to help you change permanently, like the weight that you want to lose, the lifestyle that you want to live. Like we are going to be the last step of like, this is the last coaching program you need. This is the last step that you need before you feel confident in just truly living out that lifestyle for yourself, figuring out what that is. So I had to ask myself the question, what the heck does it take to create permanent change? And, a quick Google search will tell you that creating a permanent habit will take anywhere from 20 days to like 200 days based on the research, right? And that is very, very, because it depends on the person. So if building a habit can take so long to become automatic and you really don't know when it's quote unquote automatic, something that really bothers me about saying that something becomes automatic, it means that you no longer have to think about it. But I don't think that's the case, because we have to choose this lifestyle every day. We have to continue to choose the new version of ourselves every single day. And that's a conscious decision. And so I think the first thing that really comes to mind when I think, what does it take to create permanent change, is an acceptance of a new normal or version of yourself. And you have to fully accept that you are letting go of the person that you were, and you are every day becoming closer and closer to this ideal version or this new version of yourself that is the person that is, say, 50 pounds lighter than you. So, right, a lot of us, we look at things like very outcome focused. This is where being very process versus outcome oriented really plays a role. But we might look at something and be like, I want to be 50 pounds lighter. And most people operate on that level, and they really don't look deeper than that. So what I encourage you to do if you want to make a permanent lifestyle change is you have to figure out who that person is that's 50 pounds lighter than you, right? So peel back the layers. That person that's 50 pounds lighter than you, who are they? What is their life like? How do they behave? How do you imagine that things are different than they are right now in your life? And what are the real reasons that you want to lose this weight and change your body? Because that person that you're imagining is not only 50 pounds lighter, but they probably have more energy. They're probably more productive. They probably have better relationships. They probably have all these different things in your life that you're associating with the idea of this many pounds. And you have to understand the meaning behind those tangible goals, right? Because if there's no meaning, then you'll never be able to extract value from the process of becoming that person. And if we stay outcome oriented to where we think that a switch is going to flip and you will be permanently that person once you hit 50 pounds down, then you're missing the point, because you're probably going to become that person halfway there, a quarter of the way there, as you do the actions that that person does and reap the benefits in the process that that person gains as you're on your way to that outcome. And so once we understand who that person is, then we can learn how to embody that person and become that person and leave the old version of us behind. But I think the mistake a lot of people make is they will label 50 pounds, but they won't challenge the identity that they currently have. And that's really deep shit. Like, that's hard stuff to grapple with and talk about, which is why, like, we have these conversations. I'm sure you guys do too in your coaching practice. And fitness becomes so much more than like, here's your diet, here's your training program, and more so like you have to figure out like who you want to become. Otherwise, like, this will just be another quick fix.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, and it also doesn't have to be you competing in bodybuilding. It also doesn't have to be you running a marathon or an ultra marathon in order to be that version of you, right? Mm-hmm. It can be you consistently showing up and doing the thing and having a positive association with something else in your life, right? I think that sometimes we think like, oh, well, that version of me is 50 pounds. I must be competing, or I must be doing something athletic. It doesn't mean you can't, but it's also understanding like that doesn't have to be a part of who you are.
Yeah. Well, I think what comes up for me when you say that is the identity work is huge. And along with the identity work is something that what comes up is this question of, and what skills or knowledge does that person have that I do not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because
what does that person value in
mm-hmm.
life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that will show up in how they behave every day.
And how does someone manage the dip? Right. So Seth Godin talks about there's always a dip. There's a book called The Dip. And that's whenever everything's going well, there's always going to be a dip, right? There's always going to be a habit drop. There's always going to be an identity like, oh, I fall back to the old identity. How does someone who's starting to make a permanent change, who understands their value, or values, who understands the changes that they're making, how does someone handle the dip when they feel like they slip into an old identity, whether that's with how they approach food or how they approach the weekend or restaurants or whatever those unconscious habits might be that kind of emerge again.
Yeah. And I feel like this is where it's dangerous when we rely on the word, these habits become automatic, right? Because if we believe that, if we believe that habits are automatic, then if we fall out of it, then we automatically think that something is wrong. We think that like, oh no, like I'm back to ground zero because it's no longer automatic, which is just not true, right? Because again, it's a conscious decision that you make every single day. As you become more and more that person that you want to be, you will ultimately have to think about these things less, and like they will feel more like they are on autopilot and they are the things that you do, but that's because you are embodying that person. So I like to think of it kind of as just a spectrum of like, there's this person, I'm using my hands, I'm sorry, but there's this person that you were, and that's at the very start here of the spectrum. And then there's the person that you want to be. You may never completely 100% be this perfect version of yourself, right? We want to really get rid of the idea of perfection. But every day that you choose to make a permanent change and choose to let that person go, you're getting closer and closer and closer. So when you mess up and you go off track on the weekend, or you go on a vacation, you take a week off, or whatever it is, you have to realize that you're still like, let's say this is like a 0 to 100 kind of spectrum, just to give it some numbers on it. If you've gotten maybe 50% of the way there and you have really, really changed a lot of your habits and you slip, you might have only slipped from 50% to 40%. And you have to be able to recognize how far you've come. And so something we often do with our clients a lot is reminding them, okay, yeah, maybe you over the weekend had 10 drinks on a Saturday and you're really beat up about it and you're being very, very hard on yourself for that. You have to remind yourself, what did it look like before you started this journey? What did it look like when you did not make this conscious decision every day to get back up and continue choosing to be this person? And that person might say, well, I used to, kill a 30 rack on a Saturday, right? And so then we compare, look how far you've come. When you mess up, you are still not that person that you were. And we have to have those reminders in place. And so I think just having that perspective is really key. And then just remembering, like, even when you mess up, you continue to choose to be that person. You're always moving closer and closer to becoming that person, no matter how you fluctuate within that spectrum. And yeah, just continuing to like reap value from the actions on the day to day that are going to continue to reinforce your belief that you can be that person. And that's a whole other thing, but we can get into that if you want.
Yeah, how funny is it that this exact conversation, if you just change the word from fitness to business, we could probably all look at ourselves and be like, oh, yes, yeah, true. When you talk about teaching your clients these things, obviously a lot of that comes through dialogue and coaching, but do you have a particular either framework or a way that you teach them, whether it's how they shift their mindset or if it's the knowledge that they actually need to have when it comes to fitness and nutrition? Like, is there a framework that you really walk them through or a process so that they learn all of these things so they become permanent, or is it more experiential or something else?
I would say something in the middle of that. And this will kind of segue into what I was going to explain anyway. So that's kind of perfect. And I think the only way that we truly learn that we can become the person that we want to be is not by somehow flipping a switch and being like, I believe today that this is possible, right? Like when someone starts their journey, they don't start with, like, most people don't start with like a conviction that like, I am going to be this successful, fit, awesome person. Like usually when people start a fitness journey, they're in a place where they're really unhappy and they don't really care to be like, this amazing, super successful, super fit person. They just want to get out of like hell. They just don't want to feel like crap anymore. And they can only see, maybe those 3 steps ahead. And so I think really what it comes down to is, with our coaching, what we really try to do is just meet people where they are and give them one step so they can put one foot in front of the other, because all you need to do to start to break those beliefs is take a little bit of action. I know you guys talk about this a lot, so I know you'll love this, but action comes before belief. Action comes before motivation. it's not the other way around. And so you might only have this inkling of hope that you can become this amazing person, or maybe no hope at all. But if you take one action that leads to some instant or delayed gratification, whether it's like the feeling of a great workout and some endorphins, or it's like some results that you might see, either way, you're going to get some sort of benefit. And then you're going to then have this reinforced belief of like, maybe I can do this, right? Like maybe something greater is possible for me. And that is something that everybody has a different starting place for, right? Like we all have different levels of self-worth, self-confidence, self-efficacy that will determine kind of where we're starting with this and like how much we need to build on this cycle. But it comes with actions first, then we start to believe in ourselves, and then we reinforce that over and over and over and over again. And that's by, implementing new habits, adding, a new task to the list that someone can check off that they feel is doable, and continuing to build on that. And then eventually someone will get to a point where they overcome something that they think that they originally thought was impossible, right? Oh, I could never do that workout, or I could never do that thing, or I could never track my food. It would be too overwhelming. And then all of a sudden they're doing it and it's no problem. When they overcome that thing, whatever it was that they think is impossible, and that might be multiple things for certain people, then they think, oh my God, I just did that. What else can I do? And it starts to open up this curiosity of like, maybe I can do more. And there's more and more and more hope, which leads to more and more and more action, hopefully, if it's guided right. And then more and more and more belief. And then we continue to reinforce the belief that like, I'm becoming this new person. And along that way, we get to the place where we accept this identity shift. There's obviously a lot of guidance that has to go into that, and a lot of conversation and dialogue that has to go into that. But if I had to say, what's our system? Like, meet people where they're at, make the first step really, really, really easy to do. And then because of that, you're going to be able to build, I guess, what you can call momentum and belief, and really fuel that action and belief and motivation cycle.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say too is talking about like the distance between thought and action is always like there's resistance between the two, right? And there's always resistance to taking action, and oftentimes there's resistance to taking action. I think that's where people have a misconception about habits, because for a workout or eating a certain way can never be a permanent habit.
It is a routine,
because there's resistance between the action that you take, right? And it's a really good way to look at it. Like, in order for you to eat healthy, it's not just the habit of eating healthy, it's the habit of changing what you put in your grocery cart. It's the habit of changing the way you approach food. Working out is impossible to make a habit permanently. The feeling's a habit, right? But because you have to put on your shoes, you have to get in your car, you have to go to the gym, you have to go and do the workout. Like, these are all micro habits inside of the big habit. And so it's really important that people start to see, like, if you want to build habits, to get to the bigger habit, oftentimes you have to focus on the smaller habits in between. And if you focus on the small habits in between, then that builds the bigger habit. And it's looking at all those different resistances. And when you have the identity there, right, when you're like, this is who I am, this is what I do, then you follow through with those habits more innately. I feel like
it's the bedrock. The identity is the bedrock, and you don't have to have the identity yet, obviously, or we wouldn't. None of us would be here. What's
an example of an identity for someone who's thinking of this? Like when they're thinking of like identity, and they're thinking of, okay, this sounds wonderful. I changed my identity. But do I change my name? Like, like what does that actually mean for someone who's on the other side? Or what are some helpful identity changes or ways to embody that person when they're starting to get healthy?
Yeah, I would really, and like, this is so funny because again, Lindsay, like, you said we apply this to business, and this is exactly like what we're going through too, right? But one thing I would really start to analyze and pay attention to is how you speak to yourself. And this is like the cornerstone to like making any change in your life, right? How do you speak to yourself? It dictates, those are your thoughts, and then they dictate your actions, like you just said, Brian. So if you are able to first just bring awareness, like you don't have to change it, just be aware of the way that you're speaking to yourself and start to tune into your thoughts. Meditation is really, really great for this, because that is where you can really start to monitor, like, what the heck is going through my brain? What are all these thoughts? Like, if we don't have awareness of that, that is the first step. And then we have to really take inventory of what are we saying to ourselves? And then really, how is that influencing our actions, right? And so we might notice that we're saying things like, you're a piece of shit, you're lazy, you're a failure, you're never going to amount to anything, and things like that. Like, what do you think is going to happen when that person has to make a decision of whether or not to go to the gym, right? And so basically you take inventory, and then it's a matter of starting to really change those beliefs. But, going from, say, negative self-talk of like, you're a piece of crap, to you're amazing, you can accomplish anything in the world, like that just, it feels very fake for a lot of people. So we like to kind of take an in-between step here of bringing negative to neutral. So with your self-talk, really looking at what you're saying, and if it's not positive, instead of trying to completely flip it in the other direction, being like, okay, I just told myself that I'm a piece of crap. Maybe I can say instead, this is how I am today. This is how I feel today. Or this is how I look today. Instead of, I hate my arms, saying, these are how my arms look today. And just getting to a space where we can be neutral with either our body image or the way that we speak to ourselves or our capabilities in life. Like, this is just where I am right now, because that does not define the future. And we can say, this is how I've been in the past, but then it gives us an opportunity to start to open our mind to what could change, right? And so then when we are, and this will kind of, for each separate thought and belief about ourselves, it will kind of go at a different pace, but we will eventually be able to bring that neutral statement to, I used to be somebody who relied on motivation, but now I'm learning how to cultivate the skill of discipline. And we can start to build in those like growth oriented things that we'll tell ourselves, and they don't have to be innately positive, but they can be growth oriented, right? And so we don't have to feel like we're BSing ourselves by putting like sticky notes in the mirror, you are beautiful and this and that. Like, I feel like that feels very cheesy for a lot of people, and maybe it will work for some, but really just trying to take a statement that used to be self-deprecating, bring it to neutral, and then add something growth oriented to it of like, I am working on improving this thing. And so in terms of like tactical, like statements that we want to get to when we speak about ourselves, is like, I am statements of like, I am becoming a person who values, regular exercise. I'm becoming a person who really cares what they put into their body, right? And then eventually that becomes who you are, and you say, I am someone who does this, and I am somebody who exercises 5 times a week. I am somebody who fuels my body with nutrient dense foods. I'm somebody who does X, Y, and Z. And so that's like the very broken down way of kind of how I would approach looking at the way that you speak to yourself, and how do you then change your identity over time.
Love that. I love the tactical. That's always my jam.
Yeah.
Because it really does look like that. Like, we can talk about identity change all day and how great it is to become a fit, healthy, balanced person. But really, it is such a piece by piece type of process. Like, you hear one thing on a podcast that says, oh, I'm somebody who actually eats breakfast and tries to eat something healthy or drinks water when they wake up. Like, the simplest little thing, affirming that that's who you are or who you're becoming, is a stepping stone on the way. Like, you used to say all the time, it's not an elevator. It really is like take the stairs approach to changing your thought habits. If you try to change your physical habits without changing your thought habits, the physical habit will never stick.
Yeah.
Because you might weigh your food, but in your mind, you're still like, I hate this. I can't wait till I get to have ice cream next week. It's like you're still telling yourself that you're the person who's unhealthy, even though your actions are quote unquote healthy. So I think that conversation is so important, especially when we can make it more tactical and less esoteric. So thank you for sharing that. Anything you want to add to that before I ask you my favorite?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to make this quick because I did want to give your audience just like one more kind of tactical step they could use to like actually figure out what those new statements should be. And so this is kind of like a 4-step process that we'll use with a lot of our clients when they say something like, I'm thinking of one client in particular, because she has lost nearly 100 pounds with us, and she is amazing, and she's really just grasped onto this kind of stuff, and this is what is really fueling her success now. And one day she checked in with me and she said something along the lines of like, I've always been a stress eater or something like that, and it was kind of identifying as like maybe that's still who she was. And I was like, let's break this down. So I said, you just said you're a stress eater, but you also just said that this weekend you were stressed and you had a bunch of food in front of you and you moderated yourself. So those two things don't line up, right? Like that you just behaved in a way that misaligns with the way you identified yourself. Let's break that down. So number one, again, it's just awareness around those beliefs. So like picking something like that out, that's where like a coach can be really helpful, and just like a check-in saying, hey, you wrote this. Why did you write that? Right? About yourself, or if you catch yourself saying something to yourself, but what is that belief? And then what are the facts? Not how do you feel about it, but like, what are the facts? Like what actual things are proof of whether or not that belief is true? So in this case, it was, like I just said, she was in a situation where, stress eating definitely could have occurred, but she moderated herself and exercised discipline in a way. And she still came back to me and was like, I'm a stress eater. And I was like, oh, I don't really know if that's true. Right. So I was like, here are the facts. And the other facts are that you lost 5 pounds through the holidays. And the other facts are that you didn't self-sabotage on this event that I have all this data on. Right. So I showed her all that and I was like, so you tell me, do these facts align or misalign with what you just said? And she was like, they don't align at all. I was like, great. What can we say to ourselves instead? What's a new belief that aligns with these facts? So then you can take the facts and really build up. Okay, so I used to be a stress eater, but now I am becoming someone who can really navigate these situations a lot better. And so now every time she checks in, she's like, I'm leaving behind my old self who, was a stress eater, and I'm feeling so empowered. Because once you make that shift, once you like have that change in your identity, you're like, it's empowering. Like I'm capable of doing that again. Right. And like, I can keep being that person. And that's where that belief is really reinforced. So that's like a little 4-step thing that I like to walk people through. If I catch them saying something that I'm just like, that doesn't make sense. That's not who you are.
So good. I did that, something similar, but I love the framework with somebody who said that they were a broken record the other day. Like that's a really common one. Oh, I'm such a broken record. I sound like such a broken record here. I can't just track my food. Right. And it's like, are you? What makes you say that? Because it seems to me that you're learning different ways and trying different things and hitting different problems, which doesn't mean you're a broken record, just mean that you're learning. So it's a powerful shift. Love that.
Yeah. Love it. These are all wonderful little points. I think it's anyone who's listening is going to get a lot of value just from starting to see that they can change these different elements. But Marissa, before we get out of here, we have a few different like quick fire questions that are more about you and kind of give our audience some more of an idea of who you are and some of the things that you love. So our first question is, what's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh my God, that's such a hard question. So I'm like a sucker for the High School Musical trilogy. So fun fact about me that not a lot of people know, but I'm trying to start I am opening up about, I'm catching myself with these things, but I am opening up more about is that I really, really love to sing, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But like one of the things that like really taught me how to like harmonize and sing was like those 3 movies. And like, I'm just such a sucker for those in particular. I don't know if that's like my end all be all answer, but like, this is the first thing that came to my mind. So instead of sitting here for 5 minutes trying to think about it, I'm just gonna say that.
Love it. That's great. Those were some of my absolute favorite. And I was a cheerleader in the High School Musical play at my high school. So I'm right there with you. All right. So what is one book that changed your life?
I really loved Relentless by Tim Grover, and like very like kind of like cliche books for personal development, but like that and like You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. Not necessarily because there's anything from those books that I distinctly remember like, wow, this one line changed my life. But I remember actively reading them when I was 18 years old. And I have to say that probably played a role. And just the action that it really encouraged from me. And like, yeah, maybe I was already an action taker, maybe I was already courageous, but like, I think I just vividly remember that I was sitting by the pool, or I was sitting in my chair, and I was reading these books, and I was really, really jazzed about it. And like, I don't have like a super like vivid memory of like, this was the moment, but like those books I know have really like influenced just being an action taker, like you guys have said, and just like having the confidence to do the next thing.
What is one piece of advice that you would give yourself 5 years from now?
5 years from now, or 5 years ago?
From now.
Future.
Oh, that's a different question. What would I say to myself 5 years from now? I would say always remember to come back to your roots with things. Something that I've been trying to work on lately is when it comes to like content on social media. I think because the business was just growing so fast, I got into this loop of thinking like all I need to do is just like market and like pitch for sales on my social media and like kind of have that energy versus just like giving people value without expecting anything in return. And I realized the reason that my business had such fast success was because I went 6 years giving people value without asking for anything in return, and like then capitalized on it 6 years later, right? And so I went through all that rapid growth, and then the whole like selling thing wasn't working anymore. I was like, why is that? And so I have just had to go back to like, let's just talk about how I can help you people on Instagram, right? And so yeah, so just coming back to my roots of like what got me here in the first place, and really coming back to that, you know. And I think 5 years from now, my business will only be bigger, and there will only be more problems related to all of that kind of stuff. So if you're staying true to, you know, what got you there in the first place, and continuing to like iterate on, say, that flywheel concept, if you guys have read that book, but yeah, like continuing to iterate on the things that work rather than trying to chase all the other random crap that might be shiny object type stuff.
Love that. And Marissa, what's the one habit that helps you conquer your day?
I think, well, I actually have not, I've missed one day, and it makes me so upset that I missed it, because it was because we moved states into a new home. And when you're in a new environment, sometimes habits can be a little bit easier to lose, or, you know, it's good to make new habits. But I have taken a cold shower every morning for almost a year at this point. I don't have the exact number of days or anything like that, but I've missed one day.
364.
Yeah, basically like up to, it will be 364 out of 365 days from whenever I started sometime in August. But I really, really love that, because, you know, at the end of the day, like some of that stuff feels like woo-woo shit, right? You're like, like, you know, is that really going to help? And like Alex Hormozi is really funny about that. He's like, here's what I do in my morning. I wake up and I start working, right? And everybody else has these elaborate morning routines. But what I will say is it is a small little reminder to me every day that I wake up and I do something that I desperately do not want to do. And it doesn't have to be a workout. It doesn't have to be a, you know, 10-minute meditation. Like it takes 30 seconds of my day, but I hate it. But I also love it for that reason. And I can't say that that has shaped who I am, or it's maybe become anything that I want to be. But like, I think it's just one thing that reminds me at the beginning of every day that like, you can do things that you don't want to do. And if you already got that out of the way, then like, you might as well do this other thing and this other thing and this other thing. So I enjoy / don't enjoy my cold showers, but that's what I do.
I love it. Awesome.
And so where can people connect with you? Where can they find you on your social media outlets?
Yeah. My main platform is definitely Instagram. And so that is Marissa Roy Fitness with 1 R and 2 S's. And I am on Facebook as just my name, Marissa Roy. And yeah, I would just say connect on Instagram.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. This is wonderful.
Thank you guys. This was awesome.
Yay. Awesome. Yay.
Yay.
And thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in with us. Make sure you get connected with Marissa. She's got some great, funny content that you will thoroughly enjoy. And now you go out, take this information, and conquer your day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something from it. Please remember that Christina and I are not medical professionals, so if you're going to make any changes to your exercise or nutrition routines, please consult with your doctor or medical team first. Finally, we would love you even more than we already do if you took the time to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are how this podcast moves up the ranks and becomes accessible to even more people. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday here at the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast.